"Oh, you're going to be a race car driver, are you? Well, you have 3 things you need to do." "Oh, what's that, Dad?" "Well, first of all, you go into your bedroom and pack your bag." "Okay, and then go into my bedroom and kiss your mother goodbye." "And what else?" "Well, as you're leaving, I want you to change your name. You're no longer an Agajanian."
My grandfather walked the streets with a cardboard sign saying, "Mister, can I have a job?"
Now I want all you kids to understand you're living in the greatest country in the world.
I realize this is the American dream. America is opportunity.
This is the Song of America. Hey, welcome to the first episode of the podcast Song of America, the stories of American immigrants and their descendants, and that was easy for me to say, the successes they've found through the freedom of America, financial success, political, social, whatever it is. And today we're sitting with the 3 Agajanian brothers, Kerry, JC Jr., and Chris. And we're going to talk about LA history. We're going to talk about racing history. We're going to talk about Armenian history. And I don't even know where to start with it because there's so much to tell. But I grew up in this neighborhood. I knew Ascot Raceway. You got the end of the 91 freeway and you were there and you could hear it from there. But I was reading a little bit about your father, JC, and the conversation he had with his father about starting this business. But I want to go back to your grandfather. What do we know the story of how he got here and what he did when he got here? And you guys can just talk.
Sure.
You're a historian. Yeah.
Jay wants to tell a story. I may pop in and correct a few things, but other than that, Jay, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to discuss the story about grandfather, James T. Agajanian, going into his garage one afternoon and looking over and seeing this jalopy sitting there half torn apart. And he called my father over and said, "What's that in the garage?" And my dad said, well, Dad, it's going to be a race car. I'm going to be a race car driver. And so my grandfather said, "Oh, you're going to be," and don't forget, JC was the eldest son. He was the one that was going to, just like Kerry, he was going to represent the family. The high hopes were on the eldest son when you came to a new country. And he said, "Oh, you're going to be a race car driver, are you? Well, you have 3 things you need to do." "Oh, what's that, Dad?" "Well, first of all, you have to go into your room. No, go into your
bedroom.
You go into your bedroom and pack your bag." "Okay, and then go into my bedroom and kiss your mother goodbye."
No, Shay, she was in the kitchen cooking for him.
Oh,
Wow.
so stay out of the bedroom. Thank you, Kerry, for reminding me. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so he said, "Okay, kiss Mom goodbye." And what else? "Well, as you're leaving, I want you to change your name." And of course, my dad said, "Now, wait a minute. In an Armenian family, am I doing okay so far? You don't change your name, because if you do, your cousins on the street won't even say hi to you. You're no longer an Agajanian." And my dad said, "Now, wait, Dad, slow down.
Wow.
Hold on right there. I don't want to change my name." And he said, "Well, then you have to agree to not drive that race car." And my dad said, well, can I work on it? Can I be a part of it? And my dad said, "As long as you don't drive." And my grandfather was thinking, it's a smart thing to know about automotive. It's a smart thing to work on the car. It's a smart thing to know how to wrench on an engine.
Mm-hmm.
So my grandfather said, "I think we can work that out. As long as you promise me you're not going to ever drive that race car." And my dad said, "I won't." He's getting ready to be thrown out of the family, right? He said, "Okay, Dad, I'll do that." So the agreement was made that as long as J.C. Agajanian didn't drive a car, but yet owned a car, that would be okay. And I think
James T. would be the sponsor on it.
That's exactly right, Kerry. I was about to say, my grandfather was the first sponsor of a race car team. It was a 2-man team, but he was Dad's sponsor.
Right.
That is an amazing. I'd never heard that part of the
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
He had no idea he was starting a
And this
whole
is-
industry.
And this is 1930. He was about 17 years old. And
Did they speak Armenian in the house?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Did you guys learn Armenian?
That's all they spoke. We didn't. Our parents spoke it when they
At the
didn't want
table,
us
right.
to know what we were.
It was
what
a
they were
secret
talking
language.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't teach us that.
You
But
know,
he was-
sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
Our grandfather, and we could tell the story about when he came over, but he had one of those big kind of handlebar mustaches like this, and he had a gruff voice because he'd smoke Benson and Hedges, 3 packs of Benson and Hedges a day. So his voice was like this, and boy, he was a tough guy, and his mustache was 3 different colors. It was black and gray and brown from the nicotine, and he was he commanded your attention,
Yeah.
Grandpa Babu.
When did he come here?
When did he come? Yeah, they landed just a few weeks after the 1st of January, 1913.
Wow. So before the genocide,
Yes.
or when it was
Well,
being brewed up.
Yeah, it was. There was, you might call it a pre-genocide, a smaller one in
Yes,
1896,
that's right,
I
yes.
believe.
Correct.
My grandpa was born in 1891, and so his family was well aware of what was coming. And there was the village that they lived in, which was just north of Kars, which is in Turkey now, but was really part of Russia. It was somewhat split between Russia and Turkey. And so Grandpa was just turning 18 in 1912, 1913. And he knew he was going to be drafted into the Russian army and be sent away to the front in Siberia, where several of our relatives had been sent and never heard from again. So,
Yeah.
so he told his father, "I'm getting married and I'm leaving the country, going to America." And
How?
The land of free religion.
Yeah. I mean, how do you do that? I
Yeah.
mean,
He
At
had
18.
he had very little money, just a few $100s, and he also had his new wife. He had just married, and he was only 18 or 19 years old at that point.
That's phenomenal.
And took an uncle who was a young, almost his same age, an uncle and the uncle's wife. And there was 5 of them altogether, and they left in the middle of the night on January 1st, 1913.
That's freezing.
Yeah.
And it was in the snow with a ox cart, and they're in the back of a cart, and it's being pulled through the snow. And after midnight, so that no one would know that.
Yeah.
And of course, his wife was a Kardashian, and
I
so
was
was
just going
her.
to mention that.
Yeah, and so was her brother. Was there? Was it her brother or cousin, Carrie?
Her brother.
It was her brother.
the
yeah, Came
Kardashian
over.
of the L.A. famed Kardashian.
Yeah, so
that lineage?
yeah, Robert
Yes.
Kardashian's grandfather and our grandmother were brother and sisters.
Unbelievable.
And
So
Carrie was also a partner with Robert Kardashian
Yeah, in a law firm.
in the law firm.
Years
my
ago.
dad may have visited you because he used Robert for a couple of contracts
Yeah,
when he
well,
bought
I
a
could've-
pharmacy or two.
I could have been there then. Maybe
Yeah, well-
I was there for a while, and then branched off into my own firm.
So
But it was a wonderful trip that they took it, and it's all documented from James T's autobiography.
the book we saw out of here.
Yeah, and it's when he crossed over and ended up taking a train and a freighter ship, and they went to Baltimore, didn't they?
As I
Carrie?
say,
And
where did
that's-
they land
They
first?
landed
Baltimore?
in Baltimore, but they left from northern Germany, Hamburg, on a freighter, and it took them to Baltimore. And,
Sure wasn't first class.
and took all of their money. When they landed, they had something like $5 between the five of them, six.
Wow.
But in any event, they took trains and got to Hamburg, Germany, and were really using false passports, of course. And when Chris mentioned they left in the middle of the night, and that was for two reasons. One, so that the Russians and the Turks didn't know that they were escaping, because he was under draft orders to be drafted. And the village, as I said, that they lived in and grew up in was really being fought over between Russians and Turks, even though they felt it was Armenia. I mean, you know, my grandparents. In any event, so they escaped with false passports. They didn't want anybody in the village to know either. It would have been tried to stop them. And when they got to, this is an important story, when they got to Hamburg to buy their tickets to get on the freighter, what happened was the ticket seller gave him too much change back. And he waited. He went and he told his relatives, I just bought our tickets and they gave me money, too much money back. And you can imagine somebody who didn't have any money would think this is maybe a gift from God.
Yeah, right.
And he said, they kept saying, let's go. You know, this is something that it belongs to us. And they said, my grandpa said no. And they went back to the ticket seller at the end of the day, waited till the lines were clear. And my grandpa said, you gave me too much change. And he said, okay, let me have your tickets. And he took the tickets back and he says, I know you're escaping from the Russian army. And my grandpa says, yeah. And he said, so he took the tickets and he tore them up. My grandpa told me this story. He tore the tickets up. My grandpa thought he was being arrested. And he said, no, I'm writing your tickets into Baltimore, not into New York, where everybody went into New York, of course, and where the Statue of Liberty is, right? But in this instance, he tore up the tickets, rewrote them to Baltimore. My grandpa said, why is that? And he said, well, in New York, you have to have $20 to land. If you don't have $20 in your pocket, they put you back on the boat send you back. And he said, but in Baltimore, it's much easier, the immigration, and all you have to do is have $5. And that's all they had. And
what a story.
Yeah. And so they went into Baltimore and got on a train and came straight to LA and started living with a relative who had gotten here a year or two earlier.
Do you think that this, I don't know, what do you call it? No fear, complete complete risk tolerance to do this?
Well, you know, the penalty if you got caught, which they almost did a few times, was that they would march you back. They'd be on horses, but they'd make you walk back to Siberia.
Right.
Well,
whether you made it or not.
We saw that exact thing during the 1915.
Yeah.
So the Agajanian fortitude seems like it comes from this DNA that.
Oh, it's no question about it. It's the DNA of our grandfather, at least. Yeah.
And this is that gruff exterior that he showed you as grandchildren.
Yeah.
But did he have a vocation? What was he doing? How did he earn a living? After $5, it gets too far in America.
Yeah. They came right straight off to East Los Angeles and lived with a relative. My grandfather walked the streets with a cardboard sign saying, "Mister, can I have a job?" And
he meant it compared to the ones today. You see.
Exactly. Yeah, different than the guys you see on the off ramps of the freeway. And so that's what he started then, washing dishes for $1 a day at the Alexandria Hotel, which is still downtown Los Angeles. Wow. It was a new hotel then, and he he worked for a while, and then at that point he saw a wagon and a horse hauling garbage, and that he decided that was a better, at least you get fresh air outside the basement of a hotel.
Do you think that he was the beginning of this Armenian, trash? Like we talked about a little bit before we started, but I mean,
Yeah.
all of Southern California is Armenian trash, and there were many, many
He
companies.
was one of the first.
I
That's
don't
amazing.
know of anybody that was before him in the trash business. Whether he started it or not, he was at the forefront of it.
And then your father was born soon thereafter.
Yeah, and that's a famous saying we always say. He was conceived in Armenia and born in America. So he was born in June of 1913. So he was.
I think they arrived in February.
Yeah, they arrived in February, late January, February, right. So and his birthday was in November. So
Wow.
as I say, he was conceived in Armenia.
Yeah.
And
Talk about DNA, right?
His birthday was in June, yeah.
So when he got there and he's working the trash business, was your father working with him at that time?
Oh yeah.
Well,
Right.
Paul, there's a difference between garbage and trash.
Yeah, for sure.
Big difference.
Your
Very
trash is
important.
cash.
Very important.
And back then, the garbage was like our grandfather was used to washing dishes, cleaning the garbage, and the guy would come and pick up the garbage. And like Carrie said, he'd get $1, walk in and go out. And so our grandfather, James T. Tateos Agajanian, saved up his money, got a horse, and then got a cart and started a route. But what do you do with the garbage? And in order to get a permit, you have to have hogs, because you have to feed that garbage to the hogs. And so he ended up doing that, and even close by, he had a hog ranch. He actually rented hogs for a while from a guy, and then ended up having hogs and taking the garbage to the hogs. After the garbage, after they started saying that you had to cook the garbage before you could feed it to the hogs, and then they built a oven that they'd back the garbage trucks into and supposedly cook the garbage and then feed it to the hogs. You could smell the hog ranch
Oh my gosh.
miles away when you went there. And
That's
my
true.
grandfather, it smells here, Babu. It smells like money. Oh, yeah.
Where was the EPA back then? Huh?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well,
Exactly.
but you know what? Look, what perseverance and fortitude and entrepreneurship to say, okay,
That's right.
I'll get the card. Okay, I need a hog ranch. I'll do the hog part.
It's funny. I remember our silverware used to have a USN stamped on it, like in the Navy and all that, because I think he'd pick up garbage from there and then he'd find this.
We always were impressed. We had, in some instances, the finest silverware, but none of it matched.
Yeah, right.
and we never could understand why we had all this different silverware, but it was nice silverware. And then I'd go up to the hog ranch with my grandpa sometimes, and we'd see him, and they'd clean the hog pens. And people in those days, when they dumped their garbage, sometimes their silverware would go into the garbage.
By accident.
So they always washed it all.
No wonder my wife was missing those.
That's right. Missing a spoon.
Well,
Yeah.
you had to keep the forks and the knives out of the garbage so it didn't, hurt the hogs.
right.
And also, I remember that they were picking up garbage from some of the restaurants, and the hogs were choking on coffee grounds. So our dad would go around to each restaurant till he finally found the culprit, who would be throwing the coffee grounds in with the garbage.
So what were you guys thinking as children at this point? Were you like, oh, my dad's a hog? Or you just thought it was work? This is just the way family was?
Well, I remember my earliest memory in kindergarten where everybody, the first question the teachers would always ask, what do you want to be, Sonny? I want to be a fireman. And another guy, I want to be a policeman. They came to me, I said, I want to be a garbage man. and the teacher, this is a true story.
That's true.
The teacher looked at me and went, what in the world would you want to be a garbage man for? And
That's really
and here
funny.
I'm sitting here
That's
now.
really funny, yeah. This is where you guys grew up in. I think we talked about
Baldwin Hills.
Baldwin
and
Hills, or what they
View
call
Park.
it, View Park. Is that where most of your childhood was there?
Right.
Windsor Hills, Baldwin Hills, View Park Hills. Yeah.
Right. We lived, and just close to there, we moved into the area called Windsor Hills, which was Baldwin Hills area, where the
Dam broke.
and the oil wells and all the rest.
They're still running. They're still pumping it.
And we moved there in 1950, and so before that, of course, and I was we have a sister that's older, but I'm the oldest son, and I was born in 1941, and we were still in San Pedro, and that's where the main part of the business was that our grandfather had at that point. In 1941, of course, Pearl Harbor came about, and they moved out of inland because of the concern with bombing attacks and all that. So in any event, in the late 40s, as the war ended, we moved into the View Park area, and then eventually up on the hill above, just off of La Cienega and La Brea in Crenshaw area.
So your grandpa's here for a few years. Your father says he's working at the trash business, but there's something about American, racing, power, speed, the noise. What was it that your father thought was so intriguing about all this?
Well, I mean, he was an American kid because he was born in America, so he grew up, and I guess we should tell a story on how he ended up with the name JC, by the way, because that's
still in his
started.
Because I have Junior
That's
here,
still-
but I've seen.
Yeah, that started very young. When he first went, he had his true name was Joshua when he was born.
Biblical name.
And an aunt who didn't speak English at all called him Jeshu.
Really? With Armenian accent?
Yeah, and so when he went and registered for school as in kindergarten, they said JC, and they wrote it Jacee. They didn't know how to spell his name really, and he ended up. So they called his name, and they thought it was Jackie. They put him on the girls' side of the room, and when he came home that day, he said, "My name is JC," and he changed his name right then when he was a young kid.
Wow.
And ended up that being his official
Iconic.
name.
The iconic initials of the racing world. So but he's got this car in the garage. First of all, where did he get this first car that your grandfather objected to in the first place?
The way he got it, by the way, the Jay just told the story about being, a hot rod that he was working on. My grandpa was actually at a business meeting out of town, and my dad went to the banker, and they knew my dad from being in the business and all, and they loaned him a few $100s so that he could buy this jalopy race car. The banker, my grandpa, wasn't too happy with the banker, but that's what.
Wow, that was smart though.
Yeah.
And he got the money, bought the hot rod, put it in the garage, and was working on it. And as Jay said, my grandpa, when he came home, saw the car there and said, "What is that?"
No, he said, "What's in the garage there?"
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wasn't happy.
No.
He wasn't happy. So that and the kids though were building hot rods then and racing them all over San Pedro, right within a few yards of where we're sitting right now. Were mud flats, just areas where the flooding water would come way before anything you see now in San Pedro. And they would race on the mud flats right here in the San Pedro, Southern California area. And my dad was doing that, but it wasn't organized racing. It was just kids going out and having a good time.
What year was that?
And that would have been probably 1920 or so. Let's see, he was born 13. Probably would have been, oh no, it was 1930. That's right. Because he got married in 1932 and he was, I think, 17 in 1930. And so he was, that's when it was, when he was just 17 years
So
old.
American high school, American grade school,
Yeah.
you know, the typical American kid,
Yeah.
growing up near the
He-
harbor.
Yeah, he said that we used to cut the fenders off of our cars and call them hot rods.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's
Was the Flathead V8 out by then?
Probably.
About that time, I think.
Sure.
what's that?
The Flathead
Flatheads.
V8.
Yeah. Flathead V8 was 1932.
Okay, right
Ford,
about the end.
Ford had a 1932 had a Flathead
Yeah.
V8.
Yeah, all the way to the 50s,
Right.
early 50s.
Yeah, so he was racing around, and that's what got him interested in racing. And so when he bought that hot rod that we've spoken about, or the jalopy that they called them, he got into the business, and as Jay said, grandfather became the sponsor on the car, and my dad hired a driver, and they entered races all over Southern California then.
And before that, I mean, or during that same time, he was in the business, racing business. And we have programs that date back to 1939 where he's promoting races. He was also a president of the Western Racing Association.
WRA.
And they used to, these promoters would come out and they'd collect money and to pay the drivers, and the promoter would leave town before the race was over with all the money, and the treasurers
Sounds like the racing industry.
Yeah.
and the treasurers would,
The trash business.
whoever was in charge of the sanctioning body, they would always come up short, or there would never be any money left over in the coffers. So they had said, well, let's put Aggie in there, because let's get rid of that guy. We'll put Aggie in there. He's an honest guy. And the next thing you know, there's a lot of money being saved up, and they're making a lot of money. And I'm not sure, but I'm thinking my dad or our dad, you know, after they've done this for quite a while and he's making all this money for the club, I imagine he said, you know what, I think I could do this myself, since
Yeah.
I am doing it all myself.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And he was in his 20s doing this, and they trusted him with that. He made money for the association, and then he decided after a year or two that he would promote races himself on his own. And that's how he became a promoter and owning a race car as well.
Did he live up to his promise to his father that he would never drive the
Yeah,
car?
he never raced that
Really?
we're aware of.
Raced is an important.
Yeah, drove the
He
difference.
drove.
He may have tested.
You know, but this story of your grandfather and your father, this Armenian mentality, this
Yeah.
entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
to take the risk and the next step of completely unknown. Because I'm assuming at this point that racing in America was in its infancy at best, right? I
Right.
mean, was there a Daytona then? I know they raced on the sand out
No.
there.
No,
The
that
parts-
was in the 55,
Yeah,
1955, I think.
so this is really the beginning of all
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Well, Indianapolis, of course, was 1911, so that was the first major super speedway, you might say.
Did we have one in LA? Was there one in California at all at that point?
There was.
Like Sonoma or something?
There were board tracks in the 1920s where they built tracks with boards, and right in Beverly Hills, in fact, there was a track, and so
High banked.
yeah, very high bank, very fast.
Wow.
But so racing was just in its infancy, you might say, and he was in the promotion business, and that business grew all the time. There was always the refuse company to always back up
Yeah, right.
the
Well,
racing.
Kerry, it was also very, very dangerous. And the fact that our grandfather told my dad, yes, you could continue to be involved in racing, but I don't want any son of mine driving, and probably saved Dad's life
yeah,
with
yeah.
that decision.
In those days,
Probably right.
in the 1930s,
Yeah.
there was the first, or one of the first times they built a track which was called Ascot, which we'll eventually get to. But but in the 1930s, the track in East Los Angeles, right behind the USC General Hospital.
Right.
That's where an oval track, which was called Ascot, and it was a very fast, 5/8 of a mile track, and every year they would have at least 3 or 4 fatalities or more.
That bad.
It was so dangerous in those days. Cars would catch on fire, of course, and they had no roll cages, and so
or seatbelts.
Yeah, or even seat belts. So it was very dangerous, and drivers were being killed. Sometimes two or three on a weekend, actually.
And that was actually safer than what they were doing prior to that with the board tracks.
Yeah.
And a board track was like if you put a 2x4 on edge next to each other, and they'd wear down. And they were banked, and they went pretty fast. And they outlawed those because they started calling them killer tracks. Wow. So many people would be killed on those tracks. Then it went to the dirt, like your
dad was promoting at that time.
He was promoting at that time.
And there was an Ascot prior. That's kind of interesting.
The first Ascot was in the early 1900s, 1910 or 11, and it was actually a dirt track named after the track for horse racing in England. There's an Ascot, which is a very famous and special place in England, but they only race horses there. So they built a mile track in South Los Angeles. And it was there for a few years, and it was called Ascot. And then when it closed, another track opened, the one that I was speaking of, just close.
Southern Ascot.
Yeah,
they would call that
Southern Ascot,
and also Legion Ascot
and then Legion Ascot, which was the track that I was speaking of in the 1930s. It was so dangerous, but really brought about the fame to that name, and until 1957. The Ascot that most people are familiar with.
But these were,
now.
That time in LA, these were remote. Yeah. It took a while to get there. They're all out of town. They were basically, was it considered like a bunch of hoodlums? Renegade kids screwing around with cars? Well, or was it sort of formalized at that point?
It became formalized by that time. We were promoting also motorcycles too, which
speaking of hoodlums,
which gave that image, of course. But the actual racers were very civilized, intelligent, good people that we dealt with over the years.
I wanted to add something while we were talking about the dangers, Kerry. I understand that a lot of the drivers would not wear seatbelts because not only of fires if you got upside down, but they found that if you were thrown from the car when it was flipping, you could survive. Mm-hmm. And so in those days, a lot of guys go, I'm not wearing any seatbelts. It'll trap me in the car and I might be upside down. I'd rather get a broken arm and be thrown out of the car. So not using safety equipment was important then. They didn't have the roll bars. They didn't have the roll cages that we know of. So it was an unusual decision that they'd make.
Yeah.
A life and death decision.
So now they say, we'll keep you in that cockpit.
Yeah, now they want to, lock you in and with belts and everything. No, back then, the drivers figured it'd be safer for me to get thrown away from this accident.
Wow.
And hopefully I'd survive that way than actually racing and being tied into that car.
Until the drivers that got thrown out got run over by the other cars.
And that happened as well.
Well, that's what really changed the rules in the 1940s. A driver who was very popular and a national champion named Rex Mays in Del Mar, which is a track that my brother Chris promoted races at. But in Del Mar in the 40s,
49.
It was 1949. A car, the car that he was racing flipped. He was thrown out unhurt as he thought would be. And as he tried to get off the track, a car hit him and he died.
Wow.
And they decided after that it was much safer to be strapped in the car, in which it is, obviously. So that's when they started having seat belts and eventually roll cages and others.
And Kerry, the cars themselves were getting safer by those years.
Right.
It was getting
Right.
safer to stay with the car
Right.
than to be thrown
And
out.
your mother, how did your mother deal
Oh,
with
boy.
this? I mean, is she like,
She was a great mom. I mean,
Oh,
as
the
far
best.
as far as a mother, good Christian lady, and so was our dad. And she was the best mother in the world. And she
Right.
had 4 kids she had to take care of. And she'd always
boys.
talk about 3 boys and a girl.
Yeah.
And she'd always talk about your father's out chasing his race car somewhere, because not only did he own a race car, but he promoted races around the United States. So his car would race at 18 or 20 races a year, and they'd be racing around the United States. So, and it went on for many years. I mean, his first car that he entered in the Indianapolis 500 was in 1948, and he entered a car every year until the year that he died. But that's not just one race; that's 20 races a year, and plus that's an Indy car versus he had sprint cars and he had midgets and all that other stuff. So he spent a lot of time. Our mother put up with an awful lot and raised us, and she raised us, and spent a lot of
Good
time with
Armenian
such a
food at the house?
wonderful woman.
Isn't today a special day, Chris?
Yeah, February 10th is
oh, yeah,
our
that's
mom's
right. You said it
birthday,
mentioned
It's
it's
our
your
mom's
birthday.
birthday. That's right. We're
1914.
gathered here today.
She would have been,
109.
wow.
Yeah.
Was she a good Armenian cook?
Oh, boy.
The best.
Yeah.
The best.
Doma.
Yeah, that's the best.
Her pilaf was
Yalanchi.
better than all the other aunties.
Yes, that's of course. You didn't see that around the racetrack too
No.
often in America, right? The
No.
Pilav and Doma. But,
No.
something interesting, because you're talking about your dad was a promoter, and that's really not only because your grandfather said you're not driving, but it sounds like his personality was of that ilk, that he had that friendly American, gregarious, risk-tolerant personality.
Well, he wore, powder blue suits with yellow shirts and big black bow ties and things like that. He just dressed to the nines, and he was really a promoter. And boy, they looked up to him, and because he was fair, they loved our dad because he was always fair, and he took care of his.
Well, Chris, he felt very fair to the drivers and the car owners, because he would tow his car across the United States, and he'd come to a racetrack and they'd race, and the race was over, and they'd go to get paid off, and the promoter had left with the money.
Oops.
So Aggie was an honest promoter. And people they'd come from Baggies to drive for him.
Oh, he'd always have the best cars. He had IndyCar drivers coming out and racing at the tracks that he'd be promoting at. So it was during those days when something like that can happen, and you can promote the fact that Johnny Parsons or, AJ Foyt or all these different drivers back in the day. I remember when we were the 3 of us were sitting at home on Kenway Avenue, and our dad just came down. He wore a suit every day. I don't think we ever saw him
every day.
without a suit. He'd shave and come down, and he came downstairs. We were having breakfast, and he was on his way to the track, and we were going to go to the track later that night. And my mom said, so what's happening tonight? And our dad said, well, we have a big midget race going on, and there's a guy there that's coming in. He's Italian, and he's going to be racing. And I remember, I think I might have been 12 or something, 10 or 12. And I'm going, how could an Italian guy come and race American cars on the dirt? And my mom goes, what's his name? Well, his name's Mario Andretti. And I think he's going to really be something someday.
Wow.
So when we
That's
went
true.
to the track that night, and Jay and I are selling programs, Kerry's selling, checking out the ticket sellers and all that. I remember that night, and Mario ended up getting third amongst all those guys.
Yep.
And you
All the
never
way from Italy.
Yeah.
So you guys were working at let's go back to Ascot for a second, since you were talking about it. But so your dad's, first of all, it sounds to me like the industry needed your father at the time that it happened, like the perfect place, perfect guy for the job to promote racing. But, that's different than buying a large piece of land and cutting it up and building stands. And that's a huge investment. How did that happen?
Well, he ended up, speaking about Ascot, the track was actually built by some other investors that built the track in the late 40s.
The Ascot at 91 freeway in Normandy. Was it Normandy?
You mean where the harbor, the San Diego and the 91 freeways explode?
You should have done
Ascot in Gardena. Yeah, that place.
I love it.
Yeah, Jay was the voice of Ascot.
Yeah, I just recognized the voice.
That's exactly right. But the track was built before, and eventually my dad came in as the promoter, and he was so successful. But it was always on a land lease, and so we were never able to.
Well, didn't they build that track because Carroll Speedway had closed?
Yeah.
Artesia Boulevard ran through Carroll Speedway, and then a few years later, I guess Mahoney and another guy kind of carved out a track, and they started doing it. But our dad was able to bring the big time racers there and started building that track up.
Yeah,
I wanted to add to what Chris just said. Yes, Aggie had the best race drivers at Indianapolis. The best race drivers in the country would come to Ascot in Gardena, and they would race there. But the thing is, Aggie had some of the best equipment to run Indianapolis with. And these guys, all of them, wanted to drive Aggie's Indy car. So if Aggie said, hey, I'd like you to come out and race for me, they would, great, this will get me in good with Aggie, and I may get a shot at that IndyCar ride. So one hand washed the other. They took care of each other, and some of these guys came out and impressed JC, and he would put them in his IndyCar to race that year.
Because if you guys were all working there, was that a foregone conclusion? Because our Armenian family, the oldest son, you're going to work. And I worked at my dad's pharmacies. I worked at the liquor store. I mean, that's just the way it goes, right?
Yeah. You didn't know any different.
Yeah, right.
That's true. We didn't think of anything different.
Yeah, right.
That's where we were going to work, and we all
no question.
So we all started selling tickets in the parking lot, and then selling programs and
working at the scoreboard. I remember being 9 years old and working on the scoreboard, putting the numbers in backwards, and we're looking around.
They weren't electric then.
If you fell off, you'd fall on the middle of the back straightaway.
Oh no!
And I thought it was great, but looking back, I couldn't believe that our dad would let us do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, where's OSHA?
And
right?
Jay and I and Bobby Basile, but then we did, and we would start off selling programs. Jay and I did, and Kerry would run the box office. But they'd always have to look for me on Friday. Or where's Chris? He's playing up to go get him. It's Friday. You got to go to the races, and then we wouldn't take the freeway because there was no freeway.
That's right.
It's like the Marx Brothers. They were always screwing around until they were called to the set, and then they were it was all work.
Yep.
Well, one thing I have to add to earlier, we talked about my dad wearing powder blue suits and being a very colorful guy. And the only thing you guys didn't mention was he wore a cowboy hat, which was really out of keeping in Southern California.
It was iconic, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it eventually became iconic.
It was a beautiful
isn't it here
white
somewhere?
Stetson.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really a Stetson. What was the name? Do you remember?
A Resistol. It was Stetson. Stetson made it, but the type of hat was the Resistol.
And they're beaver skin 100s there, and it's a popular hat. He loved to wear hats because
he was going bald for one thing. So in his 20s.
Yeah,
that's a good reason.
And they say that if you wear hats you go bald, or maybe it's the other way around.
Right.
But he'd wear those derbies and stingy brims, and he'd wear a captain's hat, and nothing really looked very good on him. And one year, I think it was in the 40s, he was promoting a race in Arizona, and saw a cowboy hat at one of those places, and he put on a cowboy hat, and that was the end. He looked great in a
Looked
cowboy
in the
hat.
mirror and went,
And and we're thinking, I saw people drive around with cowboy hats in cars, and I go, that's awfully strange, And then I went, wait, your dad does that.
Well, how many cowboy Armenians do you
that's a good
or
point.
Armenian cowboys?
Trash business, cowboy,
Driving-
race car promoter.
driving
Okomenians.
Cadillacs.
Yes. When did the IndyCar racing? I mean, Ascot was a dirt track, right?
Right.
So when did
half-mile dirt oval.
So when did that evolve into the Brickyard?
Well, the first car that he entered at Indianapolis was 1948, as Chris mentioned. So even though there were very few IndyCar races on the West Coast, that's when our family and my dad first got into IndyCar racing, was in 1948. He entered a car in the Indy 500.
Just out of because curiosity, because
Well, that was the pinnacle of racing,
That's
of
it.
course, was the Indy 500. And by then, and he started in the 1930s, as we talked about, that's what he did. Everybody that wanted to be at the top of the game in racing went to Indianapolis 500.
Back then, those cars would race on the dirt, on the mile dirt tracks, different places around the country.
Right.
And then they'd change the tires and they'd change the suspension and they'd race on the asphalt.
Wow.
So the same car that would race on the dirt raced over there at Indianapolis on that track. In fact, in 1952, when our dad's car won with Troy Ruttman, that was a dirt car.
Yep.
And it was the last dirt car that won. And then they started having specific cars. They called them roadsters. And they had specific towards, pavement tracks. So they then started using the dirt cars for dirt tracks. It was the same organization, USAC, well, it was AAA back then, but the same organization would put on the races, and you would get points on the dirt and you get points on the pavement. And then
was it a big industry then? Was it a big money industry like it is today, where you got cars are
Nothing
was
like
just
nothing like
the
today, but
organization.
it was
But still very popular.
yeah.
we have a picture of our dad. He's 16 years old and he's flagging at the LA Coliseum in a race. There's a race there and he's just flagging there. The grandstands were full of people. It was completely packed. They're all wearing hats, suits, all the people in the grandstands. The ladies are wearing nice clothes, and it was like a beautiful night to go out and watch these cars race on dirt at the
That's
Coliseum.
interesting. It's
Yeah.
a night out. It's like going to the
And
not
it's-
the opera necessarily, but someplace.
And it's danger.
Yeah.
And it's danger for the crowds. There was no catch
That's the
fence
intrigue.
or any of that,
That was nationally too. That's when midget racing was so popular across the nation, and they were filling midget tracks, and in fact, midget racing more so than the other types of racing, and it had caught on nationally, and it was very, very popular.